Hello friends. I never thought I'd be in this position. Never imagined that my life would unravel so spectacularly, all because of a woman who was supposed to love me. But here I am, writing this story as a cautionary tale for anyone who believes that marriage is a fortress against betrayal and deceit. Her name is Veronica. We met when we were both young professionals, ambitious and driven. She had an allure about her, a magnetic personality that drew people in like moths to a flame. I fell hard for her, and before I knew it, we were married. No kids, but we were content with our careers and the freedom that came with being just the two of us. At least, that's what I thought. That in the beginning, everything seemed perfect. Veronica was attentive, loving, and supportive. She worked as a marketing executive at a high-profile firm, while I managed a successful IT company. Our lives were busy, but we made time for each other. Or so I thought. The first signs of trouble began subtly. Veronica started appearing at home less often. She'd claim she was working late or attending networking events. I didn't think much of it at first. After all, we both had demanding jobs, and it wasn't unusual for one of us to work late. But as the weeks went by, her absences became more frequent. She stopped picking up my phone calls, ignoring my texts with excuses like "meeting ran long" or "forgot my phone." At first, I brushed it off. Work stress, I told myself. Maybe she needed some space. But the nagging feeling grew stronger. I started noticing changes in her behavior. She dressed differently, more provocatively, more daring. Her makeup became bolder, her outfits tighter. It wasn't just for work, she did it even when we were alone. When I asked her about it, she laughed it off, saying she wanted to feel confident and sexy, but confidence and sexiness weren't the problem. The problem was the way she looked at me when she said those things, like she was mocking me, testing me. Like she knew something I didn't. And then there were the nights she stayed out late, coming home with flushed cheeks and a faint scent of cologne clinging to her clothes. She'd brush it off as nothing, claiming it was just from a colleague. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. One evening, after another long day at the office, I decided to surprise Veronica. She had mentioned earlier that she was going to be working late, so I figured I'd bring her some dinner and maybe spend a little quality time together. When I arrived at her office building, I noticed her car parked outside, just as expected. But as I approached the entrance, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Veronica was standing near the door, laughing and chatting with two men. One was tall and muscular, with a chiseled jawline and piercing blue eyes. The other was shorter but equally handsome, with dark hair and a charming smile. They were all smiles, their body language unmistakably intimate. My heart sank as I watched them exchange hugs and playful banter. It was clear they weren't just colleagues. That I stood there, frozen in place, unable to believe what I was seeing. My wife, the woman I loved and trusted, was flirting with two men right outside her workplace. A wave of nausea washed over me as I realized how blind I had been. All those nights she claimed to be working late, all those missed calls, this was what she had been doing. That I wanted to confront her then and there, but something held me back. I needed proof. I needed to know exactly what was going on before I made any accusations. So, I quietly slipped away, my mind racing with possibilities. Was this a one-time thing? Or had it been happening for longer than I could imagine? Over the next few days, I paid closer attention to Veronica's behavior. She became even more distant, barely acknowledging me when she was home. When she did speak, it was always with a tone of irritation, as if I was bothering her. Her lies grew more elaborate, each one more convincing than the last. She fabricated stories about where she had been, who she had met, and what she had done. I tried to stay calm, but the constant barrage of falsehoods wore me down. I began to feel like I was living in a house of mirrors, where nothing was real and everything was distorted by Veronica's manipulations. One night, I decided to follow her. I waited until she left the house, telling me she was going to meet a client for dinner. Instead of heading to the restaurant she mentioned, she drove to a downtown hotel. I parked a block away and watched as she walked into the lobby, flanked by the same two men I had seen outside her office. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized what was happening. She wasn't meeting a client. She was meeting them. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, my mind reeling. How could she do this to me? How could she betray me like this? I wanted to storm into that hotel and confront her, but I knew I needed more evidence. I couldn't let her spin this into another lie. So, I waited. Hours later, Veronica emerged from the hotel, her arm linked with one of the men. They laughed and talked animatedly, completely oblivious to the fact that I was watching. I followed them discreetly as they walked to a nearby parking lot and got into separate cars. Veronica drove home, while the men disappeared into the night. When she walked through the front door, I was waiting for her. Where were you? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. She blinked, feigning surprise. What are you talking about? I was at dinner with a client. I pulled out my phone and showed her a picture I had taken of her leaving the hotel with the men. Her face paled. That's not what it looks like, she stammered, her voice trembling. Oh, really? I spat. Then explain it to me, Veronica. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been lying to me for months. It looks like you're having an affair with not one, but two men. Her expression hardened, and the mask of innocence slipped away. You don't understand, she said, her voice sharp. It's not what you think. They mean nothing to me. It's just fun. Fun? I repeated, incredulous. You call cheating on your husband fun? She shrugged, her eyes narrowing. Maybe. What's it to you? You're never around anyway. You're too busy with your precious work to notice me. Why shouldn't I have some fun? I stared at her, stunned by her audacity. This wasn't the woman I had married, the woman I had loved. This was someone else, someone twisted and cruel. And yet, despite everything, I still felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I could talk her out of this. Maybe I could save our marriage. I can change, I said, my voice pleading. We can fix this. Just tell me what you need, Veronica. Tell me how to make it better. She laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. You can't fix this, John. You're too late. I'm done with you. With that, she turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, shattered and broken. The days that followed were a blur of agony and disbelief. I couldn't shake the image of Veronica walking away, her words echoing in my mind like a death knell. I'm done with you. It was as if she had ripped out my heart and left me to bleed alone. Every moment seemed to stretch into an eternity, each second punctuated by the realization that my life, as I knew it, was over. I tried to function normally, but it was impossible. My work suffered, my concentration shattered. Colleagues noticed the change in me, but none could understand the depth of the betrayal I was grappling with. I became a ghost of myself, wandering through life without purpose or direction. All I could think about was Veronica, her lies, her betrayal, her cruel indifference. Despite everything, a part of me still clung to hope. Maybe she would come back. Maybe she would realize what she was throwing away and beg for forgiveness. But deep down, I knew better. Veronica wasn't the type to admit fault or show remorse. She was selfish, manipulative, and utterly consumed by her own desires. And now, those desires had led her to betray me in the most devastating way possible. One evening, after another long day at the office, I found myself driving aimlessly through the city. My thoughts were chaotic, swirling around the images of Veronica and those two men. I couldn't stop thinking about them, their laughter, their closeness, their blatant disregard for my feelings. It was maddening, and I needed answers. I needed proof. Without really planning it, I found myself heading toward Veronica's office building. I parked a few blocks away, just as I had before, and waited. As expected, she emerged from the building shortly after 9, flanked by the same two men. They walked together, laughing and chatting, their body language unmistakably intimate. My stomach churned with a mixture of anger and despair. This time, I didn't wait. I followed them closely, determined to uncover the truth once and for all. They walked to a nearby hotel, the same one I had seen them enter before. This time, I didn't hesitate. I parked my car and entered the lobby behind them, careful to keep my distance. They took the elevator to the 5th floor, and I followed suit, waiting outside the hallway until they disappeared into a room. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached the door, listening intently. Inside, I could hear their voices, low and seductive. My hands trembled as I reached for the handle, knowing full well what I might find on the other side, but I had to know. I had to see it with my own eyes. Taking a deep breath, I pushed the door open slowly, praying it wouldn't creak. To my surprise, it swung silently inward, revealing the scene inside. Veronica was lying on the bed, her clothes half on, half off, while the two men stood over her, their hands roaming her body. Their lips were pressed against hers, their bodies entwined in a grotesque mockery of intimacy. For a moment, no one noticed me. I stood there, frozen in horror, unable to believe what I was seeing. Then, one of the men turned his head, catching sight of me in the doorway. His eyes widened in shock, and he quickly pulled away from Veronica, who finally looked up and saw me standing there. "John," she gasped, scrambling to cover herself with the sheets. "What are you doing here?" I couldn't speak. The words caught in my throat, choked by the overwhelming sense of betrayal and disgust. I stared at her, my mind reeling, trying to process the scene before me. Veronica, the woman I had loved and trusted, was having sex with two men right in front of me. The reality of it hit me like a sledgehammer, shattering any remaining illusions I had held on to. What is this?" I finally managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. Veronica's face twisted in anger. "How dare you barge in here like this? This has nothing to do with you." I shook my head, unable to comprehend her audacity. "Nothing to do with me? You're my wife, Veronica. Or did you forget that little detail?" She rolled her eyes, her expression dripping with contempt. "Oh please, John. We both know our marriage was dead long before tonight. This," she gestured to the men, "is just me living my life." The taller man stepped forward, his expression cold and calculating. "Look, man, we don't need this drama. Why don't you just leave and let us handle this privately?" "Handle this privately?" I repeated, my voice rising in fury. "You're having sex with my wife. How exactly do you plan to handle that?" The shorter man smirked, clearly enjoying the situation. "Maybe you should take a hint and walk away. Clearly, she doesn't want you anymore." Veronica shot him a look, but it was too late. The damage was done. I felt a surge of rage unlike anything I had ever experienced before. Everything I had worked for, everything I had believed in, had been reduced to this, a sickening display of infidelity and betrayal. "I can't believe you," I said, my voice trembling with emotion. "After everything we've been through, after everything I've given you, this is how you repay me?" Veronica laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Oh, please. You were always so boring, John. Always so predictable. These guys," she gestured to the men, "they make me feel alive. They give me what you never could." Her words cut deeper than any knife ever could. She was taunting me, reveling in my pain. And worst of all, she was right. I had been predictable, reliable, dependable. I had built my life around her, sacrificed everything for her happiness. And in return, she had thrown it all away for a fleeting thrill. Before I could respond, Veronica's phone buzzed on the nightstand. She glanced at it briefly, then tossed it aside with a dismissive wave. "It's probably just another client," she said, her tone bored, but something about the way she dismissed it struck me as odd. I picked up the phone and scrolled through her recent messages. What I saw made my blood run cold. There were dozens of texts, not just from these two men, but from others. Explicit photos, lewd comments, plans for future rendezvous. It was clear that Veronica's infidelity went far beyond just these two men. She had been playing me for months, maybe even years. Every lie, every excuse, every missed call, it all came crashing down in that moment that I dropped the phone, my hands shaking with rage. "You've been cheating on me with multiple people? How many more, Veronica? How many more?" She shrugged, her expression indifferent. "Does it really matter? You're not going to change anything by knowing." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This wasn't just a fling or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a calculated betrayal, a deliberate attempt to destroy everything we had built together. And the worst part was, she didn't even care. "You're disgusting," I spat, my voice filled with venom. "You've destroyed everything we had. Do you even understand what you've done?" Veronica rolled her eyes, her patience wearing thin. "Oh, get over yourself, John. It's not like you were some perfect husband. You were always so uptight, so controlling. I needed excitement, and you couldn't give me that." I stared at her, incredulous. "Excitement? Is that what you call this? Betraying your husband, lying to him, making a fool of him? That's your idea of excitement?" She shrugged again, her indifference infuriating. "If that's what it takes, then yes. Better than being stuck with someone who bores me to tears." The words stung, cutting deep into my soul. She was beyond redemption, beyond reason. There was no point in trying to salvage anything from this mess. Our marriage was over, and there was nothing left to save. With a heavy heart, I turned and walked out of the room, leaving Veronica and her lovers to their twisted games. As I descended the stairs and exited the hotel, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. For the first time in months, I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I filed for divorce. It was a painful and heartbreaking decision, but I knew it was the only way forward. Veronica fought me tooth and nail, using every legal maneuver at her disposal to delay the process and complicate the situation. She contested every aspect of the settlement, from asset division to spousal support, making it clear that she had no intention of cooperating, but I refused to back down. I presented the evidence of her infidelity to the court, demonstrating that she was unfit to be trusted with any financial responsibility. The judge reviewed the case carefully, taking into account the overwhelming evidence of her deceit, and ultimately granted me a favorable divorce settlement. The victory was bittersweet. I knew that I had won the battle, but the war was far from over. Veronica's vindictive nature ensured that she would continue to cause trouble and create chaos wherever she went. But I was prepared for whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that I had the strength and determination to overcome them. As the days turned into weeks, the reality of our shattered marriage sank in. Veronica's behavior became increasingly erratic, lashing out at me, accusing me of spying on her and invading her privacy. Her volatile mood swings and hysterical outbursts made it impossible to have any meaningful conversation with her. Despite the mounting tension, I remained resolute in my commitment to protecting myself from her toxic influence. The emotional toll of the situation weighed heavily on me. I struggled to balance my responsibilities as a professional with the overwhelming burden of dealing with Veronica's downward spiral. It was a constant battle to shield myself from the worst of it while trying to maintain my own sanity. Through patience, understanding, and unwavering dedication, I helped myself navigate the complexities of our fractured relationship dynamic. The divorce proceedings were a nightmare, a relentless onslaught of legal battles and emotional turmoil. Veronica fought me at every turn, using every trick in the book to delay the process and complicate matters. She contested every detail, from asset division to spousal support, making it clear that she had no intention of letting this end cleanly. Her vindictiveness knew no bounds, and she employed every tactic at her disposal to undermine my credibility and tarnish my reputation. She accused me of being controlling, paranoid, and even abusive, painting herself as the victim in our fractured relationship. Her lies became more elaborate with each passing day, as if sheer volume of deceit could somehow absolve her of her actions. I tried to stay calm, reminding myself that the truth would eventually prevail, but it was exhausting. Every time I thought we were making progress, she'd throw another wrench into the works, dragging us back into the mire of her manipulations. One particularly grueling afternoon, after yet another heated court session, I received an unexpected call from one of Veronica's former colleagues. "Mr. Thompson, you need to know something," the voice on the other end said, urgency lacing their tone. "Veronica's been spreading rumors about you, saying you're unstable, that you've been stalking her. People are starting to believe her." My heart sank. Of course, she would do this. Veronica had always been adept at twisting reality to suit her needs, and now she was turning my friends, colleagues, and even strangers against me. I thanked the caller for the warning and hung up, my mind racing with possibilities. How far would she go? What else had she concocted to ruin my life? That evening, I sat alone in my apartment, the weight of everything pressing down on me like a crushing vice. The walls seemed to close in, suffocating me with memories of what once was. Veronica's betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound, leaving scars that would take years to heal, if they ever healed at all. I poured myself a glass of whiskey, hoping the alcohol might dull the pain, but it only made the bitterness sharper. As I sipped my drink, I realized that I couldn't let Veronica get away with this. She had destroyed our marriage, shattered my trust, and now she was trying to destroy my reputation. It wasn't enough for her to have her fun, she wanted to ensure I paid for daring to stand up to her. But I wasn't going to let her win. Not this time. The next morning, I hired a private investigator. If Veronica wanted to play dirty, then I'd play dirtier. I needed proof, irrefutable evidence of her infidelity and her attempts to sabotage me. If she thought she could get away with this without consequences, she was sorely mistaken. The PI worked quickly and efficiently, uncovering a web of deceit that went far beyond what I had initially suspected. Veronica hadn't just been sleeping around, she had been systematically destroying my life. She had been embezzling money from our joint accounts, forging documents to make it look like I was hiding assets, and even manipulating mutual friends to turn them against me. It was a calculated campaign of destruction, designed to leave me broken and penniless. Armed with this new information, I returned to court with renewed determination. This time, I presented not just the evidence of her infidelity, but also the damning proof of her financial fraud and manipulation. The judge, seeing the overwhelming evidence of her deceit, sided with me, awarding me a significantly larger share of our assets and ensuring that Veronica's attempts to sabotage me were thwarted. But the battle was far from over. Veronica, true to form, refused to accept defeat gracefully. She continued to harass me, sending threatening messages, showing up unannounced at my workplace, and even trying to turn my friends and family against me. Her behavior grew increasingly erratic, her desperation palpable. She would show up at my doorstep late at night, drunk and hysterical, demanding answers and apologies that I had no intention of giving. One particularly harrowing night, she showed up at my apartment around 2 in the morning, pounding on the door with such force that I feared she might break it down. "John, open the door. We need to talk," she screamed, her voice slurred and shrill that I hesitated, knowing full well what awaited me on the other side. But I couldn't ignore her forever. Reluctantly, I opened the door, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. "What do you want, Veronica?" I asked, my voice cold and detached. She staggered inside, her eyes bloodshot and wild. "Why are you doing this to me? Why won't you give me another chance?" I stared at her, incredulous. "Another chance? After everything you've done? You cheated on me, lied to me, betrayed me in the most unimaginable ways. And now you expect me to forgive you?" Her face twisted in anger. "It's not like you cared anyway. You were never there for me. Always too busy with your work, your precious career. You didn't even try to understand me." I shook my head, disgusted by her audacity. "You're unbelievable. Everything I did for us. For our future. But you threw it all away for a few cheap thrills. Don't try to pin this on me. Veronica lunged at me, her nails digging into my arms. You don't understand. I needed more. You couldn't give me what I needed. I shoved her away, my patience completely gone. No, Veronica. You didn't need more, you needed to grow up. To take responsibility for your actions instead of running away from them. But you'll never change, will you? You'll always be the same selfish, manipulative bitch you've always been. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. Please, John, don't do this. I can change. I swear. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh and grating in the silent room. Change? After everything you've done? No, Veronica. Some things can't be undone. And I'm done playing your games. With that, I escorted her out of my apartment, slamming the door behind her. As I stood there, listening to her sobbing and cursing outside, I felt a strange sense of relief. It was over. Finally, it was over, but Veronica wasn't finished yet. Over the following weeks, her harassment intensified. She sent me threatening texts, left voicemails filled with venom, and even showed up at my office, causing scenes and creating drama. Her desperation was palpable, and I knew she was teetering on the edge of a complete breakdown. But I wasn't going to let her drag me down with her. I took out a restraining order against her, forcing her to keep her distance. I blocked her number, changed my locks, and even installed security cameras around my property. I wasn't going to let her ruin my life any further. And yet, despite my best efforts, the damage had already been done. My reputation had taken a hit, my mental health was in shambles, and the trust one had once held so dear was shattered beyond repair. Despite the chaos, I remained committed to rebuilding my life. I focused on my work, throwing myself into projects and finding solace in the structured world of technology and problem-solving. Outside of work, I reconnected with old friends, rebuilding social connections and expanding my support network. Through patience, understanding, and unwavering dedication, I slowly began to heal, finding strength in the bonds I forged with those around me. But Veronica's interference continued to cast a shadow over my life. She would show up unannounced, causing scenes and creating drama. She would badmouth me to anyone who would listen, trying to turn people against me and undermine my authority. Her manipulative tactics were relentless, and I found myself constantly on guard, protecting myself from her toxic influence. One evening, after yet another confrontation with Veronica, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the wall. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the ticking of the clock on the mantel. I felt hollow, empty, as if the very essence of who I was had been ripped away. But amidst the despair, a flicker of resolve ignited within me. I wasn't going to let Veronica define my future. I wasn't going to let her continue to ruin my life. I decided then and there that I would fight back. Not with violence or revenge, but with strategy and precision. Veronica had spent months tearing me down, but now it was my turn to make her pay for what she had done. I would strip her of everything she held dear, her reputation, her financial security, her relationships. She had brought this upon herself, and now she would face the consequences. First, I gathered evidence of her infidelity and financial fraud, sharing it with anyone who would listen. I reached out to her friends, her colleagues, even her family, exposing her for the liar and manipulator she truly was. I made sure everyone knew the truth about her, stripping away the facade she had carefully constructed over the years. Within days, the gossip spread like wildfire, and Veronica's carefully curated image began to crumble. Next, I turned my attention to her finances. Using the evidence uncovered by the PI, I took her back to court, demanding a fairer distribution of our assets. The judge, seeing the overwhelming evidence of her deceit, sided with me, leaving her financially crippled. Without access to the funds she had so desperately tried to hide, Veronica found herself struggling to maintain her lavish lifestyle. Her credit cards were declined, her bank accounts frozen, and her luxury purchases denied. For the first time in her life, she was forced to confront the consequences of her actions, but I wasn't done yet. I made sure that every aspect of her life was scrutinized and exposed. I contacted her employer, providing them with the evidence of her fraudulent activities. They launched an internal investigation, ultimately leading to her termination. With no job, no income, and no savings, Veronica was left floundering, unable to maintain the facade of success she had built around herself. As the weeks dragged on, Veronica's desperation grew. She reached out to me repeatedly, begging for forgiveness, pleading for a second chance. But I remained steadfast, refusing to give in to her manipulations. I knew better now. I knew the depths of her depravity, and I wasn't about to fall for her lies again. One evening, after another particularly nasty confrontation, I received a message from Veronica that chilled me to the bone. "I'll ruin you, John. I'll make sure you regret ever crossing me." I stared at the message, my blood boiling with rage. Enough was enough. I wouldn't let her terrorize me any longer. I called my lawyer and filed for a permanent restraining order, ensuring that Veronica would have no further contact with me under threat of arrest. I also hired a cybersecurity expert to monitor her online activity, making sure she couldn't use social media or other platforms to continue her smear campaign. As the legal battles continued, I remained resolute in my commitment to protecting myself. I worked closely with my lawyer to ensure that Veronica adhered to the terms of the restraining order, minimizing her disruptive influence on my life. Though the process was arduous and emotionally taxing, I persevered, driven by my unwavering dedication to reclaiming my life. The battle had been long and brutal, but I could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. Veronica's desperate attempts to sabotage me had failed, her carefully constructed web of lies unraveling with each passing day. She was a shell of the woman I once knew, stripped of everything she held dear, her reputation, her finances, her relationships. But even now, as she lay broken and defeated, there was a part of me that couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. Yet, that feeling quickly evaporated when I remembered the pain she had inflicted on me, the betrayal, the humiliation, the endless nights spent questioning my worth. No, there would be no mercy for Veronica. She had chosen this path, and now she would face the consequences of her actions. As the restraining order took effect, Veronica's presence in my life diminished significantly. She no longer showed up unannounced, no longer bombarded me with threatening messages or drunken tirades. The silence was both a relief and a reminder of how far we had fallen. Our marriage had been a facade, a hollow shell of what it once promised to be, and now it was finally over, but I wasn't content to let things end here. Veronica had caused too much damage, left too many scars. I wanted her to understand the full weight of her actions, to feel the same pain and despair she had inflicted upon me. And so, I devised a plan, a final act of retribution that would ensure she never forgot the price of her betrayal. First, I turned my attention to her professional life. With the evidence I had gathered through the private investigator, I made sure that every potential employer in the city knew about Veronica's history of fraud and deceit. Her reputation was in tatters, and no one in their right mind would hire someone with such a tainted past. Every interview she attended ended in rejection, every application returned unanswered. She was blacklisted, her career prospects shattered beyond repair. Next, I focused on her social circle. Veronica had always prided herself on her connections, her ability to charm and manipulate those around her. But now, with the truth out in the open, her friends began to distance themselves. They saw her for who she truly was, a manipulative liar who cared only for her own pleasure and gain. Invitations stopped coming, phone calls went unanswered, and soon, she found herself isolated and alone. The glamorous parties, the lavish vacations, the superficial friendships, they were all gone, replaced by an empty existence devoid of meaning. I also made sure that Veronica's family understood the depth of her betrayal. I reached out to her parents, her siblings, and even distant relatives, sharing the evidence I had collected. At first, they defended her, refusing to believe the worst about their beloved daughter. But as the details emerged, as the truth became undeniable, their support waned. They distanced themselves from her, cutting off financial assistance and emotional support. For the first time in her life, Veronica was truly on her own. Despite the mounting pressure, Veronica refused to give up. She tried to fight back, launching a smear campaign against me, spreading rumors and half-truths in a desperate attempt to salvage what little remained of her reputation. But I was prepared for her tactics. I hired a team of legal experts to monitor her online activity, ensuring that any false statements or defamatory comments were swiftly countered with the truth. Every lie she told was met with irrefutable evidence, every accusation debunked with cold, hard facts. She was fighting a losing battle, and deep down, she knew it. One evening, after another particularly vicious attack on my character, I received a message from Veronica that chilled me to the bone. "You think you've won, John? You think you can destroy me and walk away unscathed? This isn't over. Not by a long shot." Her words sent a shiver down my spine, but I refused to let her get under my skin. Instead, I responded calmly, almost mockingly, "Veronica, you've lost. Accept it. Move on. There's nothing left for you here." For a moment, there was silence. Then, a barrage of texts flooded my phone, each one more frantic and desperate than the last. "I'll ruin you. I'll make sure you regret ever crossing me." I smiled grimly, knowing that she was powerless to harm me now. The restraining order was in place, the evidence against her overwhelming, and her resources dwindling. She was trapped in a web of her own making, and there was no escape. Days turned into weeks, and Veronica's desperation grew. She started showing up at public places I frequented, hoping to catch me off guard and confront me in person. But I was always one step ahead. I changed my routines, avoided predictable patterns, and made sure to have security measures in place wherever I went. She was like a cornered animal, lashing out in frustration, but unable to break free from the chains of her own creation. Then came the day that sealed her fate. Veronica, in a fit of rage, violated the restraining order by showing up at my apartment complex. She stormed into the lobby, demanding to see me, ignoring the protests of the building staff. Security was called, and within minutes, the police arrived. Veronica was arrested on the spot, charged with violating the restraining order and harassment. When I received the call informing me of her arrest, I felt a strange sense of vindication. It was over. Finally, it was over. Veronica would face the consequences of her actions, and I could move forward with my life without the constant threat of her interference. The court hearing was swift and decisive. Veronica's behavior had been reckless and dangerous, and the judge was not sympathetic. She was sentenced to community service and mandated therapy, with strict conditions attached to her release. If she violated the terms of her probation, even once, she would face jail time. It was a harsh punishment, but one she deserved. As Veronica stood before the judge, her face pale and drawn, I watched with a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. This wasn't the woman I had once loved. This was a broken, desperate creature, consumed by her own selfish desires. She had thrown away everything, our marriage, her career, her relationships, for a fleeting moment of excitement. And now, she would pay the price. After the hearing, I walked out of the courthouse, the weight of the past few years finally lifting from my shoulders. I had fought hard, endured unimaginable pain, but I had come out the other side stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Veronica's influence was gone, her toxic presence banished from my life forever. In the months that followed, I focused on rebuilding my life. I threw myself into my work, taking on new projects and expanding my business. I reconnected with old friends, rebuilding the relationships that had been strained by the turmoil of my divorce. I traveled, explored new hobbies, and rediscovered the joy of living life on my own terms. Slowly but surely, I began to heal, but even as I moved forward, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing. Veronica's betrayal had left a scar, a wound that refused to fully close. I realized that I needed closure, a final reckoning that would allow me to put the past behind me once and for all. So, I decided to write a letter to Veronica, detailing everything she had done and the impact it had on my life. It wasn't a plea for forgiveness or an attempt at reconciliation. It was a statement of fact, a declaration of the truth. I poured my heart and soul into that letter, recounting every lie, every betrayal, every moment of pain and suffering. When I finished, I felt a sense of catharsis, as if I had finally exorcised the demons that had haunted me for so long. That I sent the letter to Veronica's lawyer, instructing him to deliver it to her personally. I didn't expect a response, nor did I want one. This was for me, a way to purge the poison from my system and reclaim my peace of mind. A few days later, I received a reply from Veronica's lawyer. In it, he included a brief note from Veronica herself. The handwriting was shaky, almost illegible, as if she had written it in a state of emotional turmoil. "I'm sorry, John. I know I've hurt you, and I can't undo what I've done. But please, just know that I never meant for things to go this far. I was lost, confused, and I made terrible mistakes. I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me." I read the note several times, my heart heavy with conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to believe her, to hold on to the memory of the woman I once loved. But another part of me, the part that had endured her cruelty and manipulation, knew better. Veronica's apologies were meaningless, her remorse insincere. She had chosen her path, and now she had to live with the consequences. I burned the letter, watching the flames consume her words until nothing remained but ashes. It was symbolic, a final act of closure that allowed me to move on without looking back. Veronica was no longer a part of my life, and I was determined to keep it that way. As the years passed, I continued to thrive. My business flourished, my friendships deepened, and I found happiness in the simple pleasures of life. I dated again, cautiously at first, but eventually allowing myself to trust and love once more. I built a new life, one founded on honesty, integrity, and mutual respect. And though the scars of the past would always remain, they no longer defined me. I had learned from my experiences, grown stronger because of them. One evening, as I sat on my balcony, sipping a glass of wine and watching the sunset, I reflected on the journey I had taken. From the depths of despair to the heights of triumph, I had faced my darkest fears and emerged victorious. Veronica's betrayal had been a painful lesson, but it had also taught me the value of self-worth, the importance of standing up for what is right, and the strength that comes from perseverance. As the sky darkened and the stars began to twinkle overhead, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. Life wasn't perfect, and it never would be. But it was mine, and that was enough. And so, I moved forward, ready to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that I had the strength and resilience to overcome anything life threw my way. I had learned that true love and commitment required sacrifice, honesty, and unwavering dedication. And with that understanding, I vowed to build a brighter future for myself, free from the shadows of the past. Years later, as I reflect on those tumultuous times, I realize that they shaped me in ways I never imagined. I learned the true meaning of resilience, the power of love, and the importance of standing up for what is right. Our marriage had been torn apart, but from the wreckage, I had rebuilt something beautiful. Something real. And though the scars of the past would always remain, they no longer haunted me. Instead, they served as a reminder of how far I had come, of the strength I had discovered within myself. Veronica, for her part, disappeared from my life entirely. She eventually moved away, unable to bear the weight of her own choices. I heard rumors that she had gotten her act together, that she had finally taken responsibility for her actions. But I didn't dwell on it. What mattered was that she was no longer a part of my life, and that our paths would never cross again. As for me, I found peace. I remarried, to a woman who loved and supported me in ways I never thought possible. Together, we built a new family, one founded on trust, honesty, and mutual respect. We traveled, pursued our passions, and created memories that strengthened our bond. Through patience, understanding, and unwavering dedication, we forged a life filled with love, laughter, and joy. Despite the hardships of the past, I found happiness in the present. I thrived under my own care, developing into a confident, compassionate individual with a bright future ahead. I nurtured my relationships, cultivated my passions, and embraced the opportunities that came my way. My love for myself and devotion to personal growth provided a solid foundation for my future, fostering an environment of self-love, security, and happiness. Despite the scars of the past, I found peace in the knowledge that I had done everything I could to protect myself. I excelled in my career, achieved my goals, and developed into a confident, compassionate individual with a bright future ahead. As I looked back on those tumultuous years, I realized that sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones worth fighting. I had faced betrayal, deception, and heartbreak, but in the end, I had emerged victorious. My life was mine again, and that was all that mattered. And as I gazed toward the horizon, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, I was ready to face them. Because I had learned that true strength comes not from avoiding hardship, but from overcoming it, and with that knowledge, I stepped forward into the future, ready to embrace whatever life threw my way.